Krishna Haribo. Haribo. Let's sing a song. Sung by Narottam Das Thakur. Hari Hari Bipale. We sing this song many times, so I'm sure most of you can follow it, even if you don't know it by heart. The words are simple, but Hari Hari Vipale Janama Goainu Janama Goainu Hari Hari Vipale Janama Goainu Goainu Manusha Janama Paya Radha Krishna Krishna Navajiya Janiyashu Niyabisha Kainu Shunya Bisha Kainu Golokera Premadana Harinama Sankirtana Jan Nilokene Tai Ratina Jan Nilokene Sara Vishanale Divanishi Yajole Samsara Vishanale Hari Bol. Oh, Hari Bol. Madhav Nani has arrived. So I'll say a few words about this song before our main guest speaker will talk. So this is a song about lamentation. But it is not material lamentation. We are told in the Gita, Krishna says, "Naso chati nakang shati." One should not lament, no, one should not hanker after anything material. We hanker after things, and when we get it, then we're still not satisfied, and then we lose it, and then we lament. But here, this kind of lamentation that Narottam Das Thakur is doing, this kind of lamentation means purification. In other words, if we can lament like this, and we should lament, then we'll be purified. So he says, Hari Hari Vipale Janama Goainu. Manusha Janama Pai Radha Krishna Nabaji Janiya Shunya Bisha Kainu. He's praying to the Lord, my Lord, I've wasted my life. I've wasted my life. The human form of life is a great boon. It's an opportunity, a golden opportunity. Because in human form of life, we get developed consciousness, we can inquire. Now is the time to inquire. Who am I? Who is God? What is my relationship with Him? What is this material world? What is the relationship between this material world and God and Krishna? You can know that you can do this in the human form. You cannot do in the other forms, lower forms of life. So, Narottam says, I got this human form, which was really meant for searching out these questions and specifically for worshipping Radha and Krishna. But he said, Radha Krishna na bhojiya. I neglected to worship Radha and Krishna. I didn't do it. Instead, I pursued material things. Modern civilization, we think, if I can get a big house, nice car, nice business, and a nice bank balance, nice wife, nice family, then I'll be happy. But we don't look around and see that people who have those things, they're not happy. The fact is, these things do not make you happy. And America is a prime example of that, because all these things are available. They have enough cars, enough businesses, enough everything, more than enough, and they're not happy. So, then he says, what is the solution to this problem? He said, I know what I should have done, but I didn't do it. Right? Sometimes Is there any one of you can say, well, there was never a time where I knew what was the right thing to do and I didn't do it? We all do that. So Narottam says, I knew better, but I didn't do it. Therefore, he said, I consider myself that I've been drinking poison knowingly. Drinking poison knowingly means I'm committing suicide. Suicide means to forget that one is spirit soul. We've been told by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Jive Swarupoy Nitya Krishna Das. What is our identity? We have forgotten our identity. We have forgotten our identity and we've accepted these temporary designations as our identity. We think, I am American, I am Australian, I am Russian, I'm African, I'm Indian. Oh, there's so many designations. These are called upadis. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, sarvopadi vinirmuktam. You have to give up all these false identification, these designations. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself said, I am not a Brahman, I am not a Vaishya, I am not a Sudra, I am not a Kshatriya, I am not a Brahmachari, I am not a Grihastha, I am not a Vanaprastha, I am not a Sannyasi. All negative, negation. He said, none of these things. Then what you are, what are you? If we tell you, give up these designations, then what is my what is my identity? He said, Gopi Bhartu Padakamalayo Dasa Dasana Das. I am the servant of the servant of the servant of Gopi Bhartu, he who maintains the gopis. I am a servant of Krishna. This is, the acharyas tell us this over and over in different ways. In the Prema Vivarta, Krishna Buliyaji Bhagavan Chakore Pashate Mayatare Japatiya Dhare. Because we've forgotten our identification, we've forgotten our relationship with Krishna, now we are trying to make adjustments in the material world to be happy, but it will not work. So Narottam says, Golokera Premadan Harinam Sankirtan. This Mahamantra, this has been brought by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Nityananda Prabhu. And where did it come from? Goloka, spiritual world. It's not a material sound. And as Prabhupada says, it's the song to develop love of God. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is giving this. What Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gives, no other avatar, no other incarnation has given this. Therefore, Rupa Goswami, when he met Lord Chaitanya, he composed a very nice prayer. I think all of you know this prayer. Namo Mahavadanaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namani Gaura Tusenama. He recognized Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He said, you are the Mahavadanya avatar. You are the most magnanimous, merciful avatar. You are giving what nobody else has given. Never been done before. He is giving us knowledge of who is Krishna. People don't even know who is Krishna, what is Krishna. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is giving love of Krishna. How merciful is that? And if we know Krishna, if we can understand Krishna and develop love of Krishna, then Krishna himself declares in Bhagavad Gita, your life will be successful. Janma karma chame divyam. It's not an easy thing to understand Krishna. Not an easy thing. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has made it easy. He's given us this method, the method to his madness, you could say. Some people thought Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was a madman. But he taught by his example that just by this chanting, you can develop love of God. And he was giving it to everyone. He came with Nityananda Prabhu, and together they overwhelmed all of Nadia, this area where we are. This is the Nadia district. This is where it all began. Everyone. And then Mahaprabhu went to Puri. And from there, he also went touring all over India, distributing this gift, doing Nam Sankirtan. Narottam says, Dina hino jatto chilo harinam uddharyalo, thar shaki jagai madai. He was giving it to the most unqualified people. Jagai and Madai, they didn't want it. We didn't want it. In the West, we didn't want it. We were busy thinking, we wanted other things. We wanted nice car, nice house, nice this, so many things. But Prabhupada was so merciful. Prabhupada was representative of Gaura Nityananda, and he gave us this. And as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, I'm giving this out to you all, but you should make your lives perfect. And then you also have to give it out to others. You have to distribute the teachings of Krishna, Krishna Upadesh. Prabhupada once said, you cannot repay the spiritual master for what he has given you. It is so great. What he's given you, what you can give him in return. He said, you cannot. He said, but if you want to try, then preach. Go out and give it to others. We have all come because of that method. Prabhupada, as soon as he made a few devotees, he was sending them out. And they were recruiting and bringing. They were empowered by him to recruit others and bring them in, and it went around the world like this. So Narottam concludes his song saying, yes, I wasted my life. I didn't take up Krishna consciousness sooner, but better late than never. So he says, now coming to the end, I've realized what I've wasted my life. So now I'm coming to you, Krishna, And I'm begging you, don't push me away, because I have no other shelter. We have no other shelter. So, that is the, we could say, substance of this song. Haribol. So, today we are blessed again, fortunate that His Holiness Hari Sauri Prabhu has come to give us some drops of nectar. He is full of nectar. And for those who don't know, but I think everybody should know, he was the last personal servant of Srila Prabhupada. And when he took up that service, Prabhupada said, what? You must never leave, you must be by my side 24 hours.
No, that was Bhattacharya.
Huh?
Oh, no, sorry, that was
It was you.
Prabhupada said that to everybody.
Yeah. And so, for a year and a half or so, he was always with Prabhupada. So it's valuable we get this opportunity to hear. It's like when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was in Puri, Swarup Damodara Goswami was always with him. You never saw Chaitanya Mahaprabhu alone. Always with Swarup Damodara, his secretary. In fact, this is the… so Prabhupada also, he had a servant always with him, and so he cannot remember everything for all those days, a year and a half, but when he sits down to talk, things come to mind, he remembers things. He has written down a lot, but I'm sure there's much more than what he wrote. Because every day, a day in the life of Prabhupada was filled with transcendental, things happening. And if you're there, you're fortunate enough to be around, you catch some of it. So I won't take up any more time. Let Hari Sauri speak. Haribol.
Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. You're okay now? Good. I got a bit panicked when I saw this notification on the Facebook page there, because we had the same problem, but earlier in the year, so not pleasant. Everybody knows Madhvananda, yeah? He's our scholar, and how long have you been in Orissa?
1993.
93? Long time. Good. Nice to see you. Okay, well, I'm not sure what exactly to talk about. Usually somebody asks a question and then we get going from there. So if anybody has a particular question, let's try dealing with that.
Srila Prabhupada, back in 1970, he had this vision to establish bases in India. I understand the first one was Srila Mayapur, which took a little bit to get off the ground. The second one was Bombay, and the third one was Vrindavan. Can you tell us a little bit about his
Prabhupada's plans for preaching? Yeah, well, I think if you go back even to 66, right at the very beginning of ISKCON, Prabhupada was planning to have a center in Vrindavan at least. And he, in the several letters where he refers to his attempts or his ambition to get what he called an American house in Vrindavan. He mentions that several times, an American house. Then when he went over to, came over to Mayapur, he again referred to an American house in Mayapur. One of his godbrothers who had, let's say, inherited a lot of the mutts from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. So he had a lot of land. So Prabhupada wrote and asked him that, I just have a few disciples. I just like somewhere to bring them every year so they can experience living in the Dham, at least for a short while. If you kindly give me just 1 acre of land, that will be sufficient. We'll join up with you, and I'll go and preach on your behalf. And Prabhupada was sincere in saying that. But of course, this godbrother didn't realize who Prabhupada was and the value of what he was doing, so he refused him. So his reaction for that was that he stayed where he was. Prabhupada took over the whole of Mayapur. So Prabhupada was dynamic. He had more plans to fulfill than, what anybody could hope to help him with. Just no matter how many people came and joined up, no matter how many temples, were started, no matter how many books he was writing, Prabhupada had a capacity to just unlimitedly extend himself through the facilities that Krishna was giving him. When you were traveling with Prabhupada, it just seemed like he had a limitless, enthusiasm and ability to, preach Krishna consciousness to the masses. His ambitions went way, way beyond what anybody else could understand. There's a story from, not a story, fact. Actually, if you look, I looked that up one time. Prabhupada frequently used to say, I'll tell you a story. It's not a story, it's a fact. So Prabhupada apparently had gone to some function that Bon Maharaj was holding for the Vaishnavas, some feast. So, because he was the Bada Sahib. You know what a Bada Sahib is? Anybody know the Bada Sahib? Big Westerner Sahib. So he said our Bon Maharaj, so he was having a festival. So at that festival, he had given 1 knife and 1 fork for each person. And Prabhupada, when he said that, he said, he's a Bada Sahib, become a big Westerner. So they laid it all out, and then Prabhupada looked at it. He said, I didn't know even which way to use the knife. He said, I never ate like that before. So he was laughing. Bon Maharaj had become a big, Westerner. He said, so Bon Maharaj said to him, he said, so you're going to the West and you don't know how to use this knife and fork? So it's like criticizing him. Or maybe he was trying to, increase his own stature. Anyway, it was just, I don't know the year exactly, but it must have been like 64 or 65, because apparently it was well known that he was going to the West. Anyway, so Prabhupada immediately replied, he said, I'm not going there to learn anything. Bon Maharaj had suggested you have to learn how to use this knife and fork if you want to be successful in the West. So Prabhupada said, I'm not going there to learn anything. I'm going there to teach them how to forget. They forget their own culture and take up Krishna consciousness. So Prabhupada had a very clear vision of what he was about. He had a very clear determination to spread Krishna consciousness all around the world, unlimitedly. And as soon as anybody joined, they were engaged in that, plan of his. If you look and see, because Prabhupada said that he had so many souls that were sent to him to help him with that mission. And in New York in '76, we were just coming back from a morning walk, we were in the car, and Rameshwara Swami at that time, he asked Srila Prabhupada, he said, just as Krishna, when he's about to appear, so many personalities, demigods or whatever, they take a birth just ahead of him so that they can assist him in his mission. So he said, is that true also for the spiritual master? And Prabhupada said, yes. Yeah, so many people have sent, devotees have been sent to help the Harinam Sankirtan movement spread. So, without hopefully offending anybody else, but I'm sure Prabhupada had an entourage that took birth in, New York or London or any, Western culture. They took birth there just a little ahead of Srila Prabhupada's arrival so that they could assist him with his work in preaching Krishna consciousness, work that was to come. And you're gonna, when you look, I've just finished reading Shyama Sundar's 2 books, Chasing the Rhino. And it's a remarkable book, amazing detail and coherence in the whole telling of the story. So you look and you see, as soon as Prabhupada arrived in New York, because he had to struggle really hard for about a year, and so many horrible things happened, having to live in the Bowery in that loft with this young man that was a LSD freak who went mad when Prabhupada was with him in the room. Prabhupada had to ran down the stairs. Then fortunately he met somebody else that he got to know and they helped him. But the point is that as soon as Prabhupada got a little footing, then all of a sudden people like Brahmananda and Kirtananda and Achyutananda, so many others, when they met him, and within a few days or a few weeks, that was it. They were sold out to Prabhupada for the rest of their lives. Just if you look and see what Prabhupada did, he didn't, his methodology was something that was probably unlikely to succeed from an ordinary point of view. He had this name that nobody could pronounce, right? And just, again, that knife and fork thing. He was eating from a paper plates or in those days, when I first joined at least, we used wax paper rolls. You get these rolls and just strip them out there because they were easy to clean and collect. So Prabhupada, and of course he wouldn't change his dress either. So he was walking around, with his saffron robes. People would look at him, unusual character. So there was a lot of things about Srila Prabhupada that on anybody else were unlikely to succeed. But Prabhupada, somehow or another, got a sold out life and, soul to him without changing anything. That was a point of personal pride for Prabhupada, that he never changed anything. He said, I'm just giving what my Guru Maharaj gave, that's all. Of course, there were allowances in different circumstances, but that was his general thing. So when devotees joined, he didn't ask them, to wear dhotis or shave their heads, although he did want the seeker. But otherwise, he didn't mind if they were wearing Western clothing. And some of them were working, so he kept them working, doing the job. But at the same time, he himself, kept himself as himself. That was a very important thing. So when the devotees saw how serious Prabhupada was, another thing was, using Sanskrit. Prabhupada was lecturing, right, from 65 or 66. And he would talk, as we always, identify with him. He would quote profuse amounts of Sanskrit slokas, which nobody could understand. Prabhupada didn't mind. He kept on preaching like that, and people came and joined anyway, even though they couldn't really, the whole idiom, it was just something completely foreign. But Prabhupada was so powerful, so potent, so pure, that, any person, when they heard him, they were immediately attracted to him, although they couldn't understand really what he was about, but they knew it was something important. So you get this situation where he's in 26 Second Avenue, people start appearing, they walk through the door, they never come back. Brahmananda, who was recalling, they had that flat at the back of 26 Second Avenue, little tiny place. I haven't seen it myself personally, but I don't think it was any bigger than this room, certainly at the flat at the back. But Prabhupada, he would preach every night, or every few days, in the storefront there. And the storefront is small. It's about this size. Yeah? I was there 3 or 4 years ago, first time I'd ever visited. And you get these people just, magically appearing. After a few months in 66 and 67, early, I think I might be mistaken, but I think it was like the 1st of January. Is that right? Anybody got a memory on that one? But early January, anyway, of 67, Prabhupada flew off to San Francisco. And he's never been there before. He's only ever been to New York. But when he gets to San Francisco, there's this huge crowd of about 100 people waiting to see him. They came to the airport. Shyama-Sundar says he had this dog called Ralph. So Ralph the dog was running around. It was packed up. Somebody filmed it. Allen Ginsberg was there. So many others were there. Shyama-Sundar's there with his curly hair. And, there was this greeting party for Prabhupada. He didn't do it himself. He didn't, make the arrangements to get all that together. Just Mukunda. Sorry, I have to get some. I didn't run to the clock. I just want to watch the flight right now. So all these people turned up at the airport. It's not that Prabhupada had a secretary or, he himself had made up a list of people that he wanted to see or anything. He just kind of casually mentioned to Mukunda, thank you, that Mukunda had come, to see him. He just got married by Prabhupada to Janaki, and Jamuna had come for the wedding at 26 Second Avenue. And then from there, Mukunda decided he was going to go to the West Coast, and then maybe he might go on to India. So Prabhupada didn't, insist, oh no, you have to stay here now, you're initiated. How can you go whimsically wandering around? Rather, he kind of, almost casually, he asked him, he said, well, okay, if you're going to the West, to San Francisco, why don't you see if you can do something there? that was it. That was the instruction. It's very simple, nothing elaborate. Just see if you can do something there. And as soon as he gets there, because he goes and sees Shama Sundar, they're coming down from being up on the forest lookout tower. They come down because Mukunda's told them there's this far-out Swami, I got initiated. Oh, really? What's that all about? No, you just chant Hare Krishna. So they went down with Mukunda to San Francisco. And the word gets out. And as soon as Prabhupada arrives, as soon as he sets foot on the tarmac there practically, there's 100 people chanting Hare Krishna, including, Allen Ginsberg was influential, at least amongst the students. So he was there. So it was like magic, wherever, from then on, practically, wherever Prabhupada went, devotees were going ahead and establishing some kind of a place to preach Krishna consciousness from. And Prabhupada would just encourage them. And it was almost effortless. It seemed that way. Looking back now, I mentioned this the other day when I was giving the class, that looking back now, when we were just completely untrained neophytes, we go out anywhere and everywhere on Prabhupada's instruction to preach Krishna consciousness. And it spread like wildfire all over the world. Prabhupada told me, he said, up until 1968, he said that from 68 onwards, that was when this movement really took off. Yeah, not 66 or 67. Because 67, Prabhupada had to return to India for quite some time because of his illness. And that was another interesting thing. I think that Gargamuni, he had published recently a short transcript of a conversation that Prabhupada had with Bhagatji, who was a good friend of his and follower from Vrindavan. So when... what was I going to say? Sorry, what was that? I said before. Before Bhagatji. Yeah.
You broken?
You said the movement didn't start until 68.
Right. Okay, I lost track. This is one of the problems.
Prabhupada said the movement really began in 68.
Yeah.
Really, the devotees went there, were opening centers for Prabhupada.
I've lost my track completely. Anyway, 67, 66 and 67, not much happened. There were a few centers that were opened. But Prabhupada said the movement really took off in 68. At that time, so I did a little bit of research. It looked like from 65 when he arrived up until about 68, there were 4 or 5 centers. By the time you get to 71 or 72, there's 50 centers. He had at the beginning of 68, he had about 50 disciples initiated. By the end of 71, he had like 600, 700. So things just went bang. I mean, they just exploded from 68 onwards. Prabhupada was traveling like anything all over, any part of the world. And the movement was being established on an unbelievable scale. It was even karmis, they couldn't understand how Prabhupada was doing it. And not only that, there's so many people to train up in Vaishnava etiquette and culture and practice sadhana bhakti. At the same time, he still had his real work, which was writing his books. Yeah, I mean, whatever jobs there were to be done, Prabhupada ascribed that or gave responsibility for that work after he'd shown personally by his example. He gave the responsibility as soon as he could to these new disciples who didn't know anything. So Brahmananda became the first temple president of ISKCON. And, he'd been around for a couple of months. That was it. So he was the new temple president, or the original temple president. I do remember one incident where here in Mayapur, one devotee came, what's his name, Mahavir from Alachua. Yeah, he came. He'd been preaching in Brazil, and quite successfully. They had a lot of devotees there. So he and Pramana and what was his name? Something Prakash. Anyway, 2 South Americans and Mahavir, they came to Mayapur in 76 looking for sannyas. They wanted to get the Dhanada. So Prabhupada said, all right, well, first of all, you have to do something. Yeah, and then we'll see. So he said, here in Mayapur, we need some help with the management, so you can start with that. So immediately Mahavir went round to the offices and told them, Prabhupada said I'm to be the new temple president, so you all have to... So it was quite funny the way that he did that. So then the local devotees came to Prabhupada and said, who is this guy? He says that he's the new temple president. So Prabhupada called him in. He said, no. He said, just you first of all work together with the devotees, then we can think about some position, yes, of influence. So after he'd spoken with Mahavir, Prabhupada turned to me and he said, why are they so keen, to be temple president or sannyasi or this or that? He said, I was never a temple president. Because he's the acharya, but he said, I was never a temple president. He said, I never wanted to be a temple president. So his own personal ambition, if you like, or duty that he had to perform was writing his books. That was Prabhupada's own personal service. Just as we look for we look for some service to do. So that was Prabhupada's own personal service, was writing. Everything else was incidental around the translation and distribution of the Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita. That was what Prabhupada's main personal interest was. So how would he fit that in with, the spread of the movement? Everything, sometimes Prabhupada would express surprise that I could never imagine that things would get, as big as they have. But on the other hand, sometimes he would say the opposite. Like he told us that in the future, historians, they will mark this period when the Krishna consciousness movement saved the whole world. So that's a vision. There's the story about Prabhupada sitting on the park bench telling this man, and I don't know whether they knew this man's name or not, but Prabhupada told him, he said, oh yes, I have temples. I have many temples all around the world. And that he was sitting like a pauper at that time. So how to put all these things together, that Prabhupada, on a very simple level, he wouldn't give any credit to himself. He gave credit to everybody else. But everybody knows it was, Prabhupada's personal presence. You could not have had the Krishna consciousness movement without the personal presence, of the Acharya, Srila Prabhupada. So it was always very amazing to me, traveling with Prabhupada, how things just seemed to happen. Things just grew and developed at a phenomenal rate. And Prabhupada took it all in his stride. And yet, actually, physically, he wasn't fit to do it. So this transcript, that's what I was thinking of this conversation, short, between Prabhupada and Bhagavad-ji. Prabhupada told Bhagavad-ji, he was speaking in Hindi, and I think that's why it wasn't transcribed and why it's not on Veda base. I think Gargamuni got a hold of it somehow or another and had it translated. But Prabhupada told him, he said, actually, he said, I was so sick, I became sick in 1965. Right at the very beginning, he said, I became ill and I never recovered from that. So many diseases. So from 66 onwards, he said, I was always ill. And he said that I was getting in the car. I think in 67 he had gotten in a vehicle to go to Vrindavan to see this Ayurvedic doctor because he had had that heart attack on Labor Day, is it, in America? Labor Day, end of May. So Prabhupada got that heart attack. He was collapsing. He had the shaking and tremors. He was falling unconscious or half unconscious. They had to rush him to the hospital. And if you look at his history, there was always something seriously wrong with him, always. He got heart palpitations, he had kidney disease, he had high blood pressure, his teeth were literally falling out. I have one in my house. Tamal Krishna has one around his neck, but he had that. He put it in his will. When he's put into samadhi, then Prabhupada's tooth has to stay with him. Anyway, the thing is that Prabhupada said, he said when the car came to take him to Vrindavan, he said, as I was getting in the back seat, he said, I was so ill that I was sure, he said, now I'm going to die. As he was sitting in the car, now I'm going to die. But somehow or another, Krishna saved me. So when he came, right at the very beginning, he said before 1965, practically, he never had any illness. Yeah, he was always quite, energetic and fit. There were one or two incidences. He did have an operation on his what do you call it? Groin, when he was living in Jhansi. So these students, medical students, they were all living in this big house with Prabhupada. And in the day they would go and, study their work. In the evening he would try to preach to them. We got one disciple was initiated, Haridas, Prabhakaracharya. But the others were not really serious. But what was I going to say? I've lost it again. He had an operation, and he said the students were looking after him. So that's the only major one that I know of. When Prabhupada came, before that, when Prabhupada left Calcutta, within a couple of weeks, he had 2 heart attacks. So that was the first time that he had anything really serious. And at that time he thought, if there's a third one, if it comes the next night, he said, I'll surely die. But Krishna appeared to him in his dream on the third night. He said, a many-armed form. And he was rowing the boat. It's funny, Prabhupada's English was quite, unique. When he was telling us this story, he said, now Krishna showed me him that he was bowing the row. What is that? I said, rowing the boat? Yes, very good. So he saw Krishna rowing the boat. And he said, then I knew I'd be all right. So in 1967, though, he said that there was to be another heart attack. He'd had 2 on the ship. He said the third one was postponed until 1967. Then it came. So then from that led to him going back to India for at least 6 months. So from 65 onwards, anyway, he says in this conversation, he said, I was never well. I was always ill. So it's incredible when you look at for a fit, healthy person to manifest a movement like ISKCON, every aspect of it, and at the same time, at any moment, he felt sometimes he could just drop down dead. But he would just push on and do it. He said, I was just exactly as I was sitting in the car, getting to sit in the car, I was sure that now I'm going to die. That was what he was thinking as he was sitting in the car in 67. Now I'm going to die. But, of course, he didn't. We know that. But anyway, I mean, the thing is that Prabhupada's activities are inconceivable. Yeah, we can't understand what was going on within Prabhupada. We got the benefit of, Prabhupada's pure devotion and his desire to teach it. But the fact is that we could never tell what was happening with Prabhupada internally, what he was having to go through in order to spread Krishna consciousness. It looked effortless, but it wasn't. It was fraught with ill health all the way through. So, you got to excuse me, my brain doesn't work properly anymore. Anyway, so Prabhupada was traveling like anything, from one place to another, flying, from one continent to another, showing everything by his own personal example. And so it made it look like Krishna consciousness was practically effortless. Yeah, I always got that in. Prabhupada would give an instruction or express a desire, and it would happen. He wanted to go to Russia. He went. It was, unheard of that he could get into Soviet Union, with two Americans as his secretaries, and arriving in Moscow in the middle of 1971. It was unbelievable. But Prabhupada's activities were unbelievable. And at the same time, he said it was just very simple. You just follow what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, chant the Hare Krishna mantra, and you'll be successful. So that was all due to Prabhupada's determination. All these seemingly magical events. People, as we said, with the devotees that met him in San Francisco, I mean, within a couple of days, practically, that was it. They'd given up their entire life up to that point and just joined up with Prabhupada. And, the whole movement spread like that. So we have to be very thankful. I think that's a proper word. Grateful that we have taken our births in such a time that this ISKCON movement, has been established. It's definitely Krishna's arrangement. Prabhupada said that the golden era of Kali, there's 10,000 years. So he said that begins with Lord Chaitanya's appearance. So we're 500 years into the golden age. And this ISKCON movement now is the first time that Krishna consciousness has gone out of India. So that will, as Prabhupada told us on the train, it will be marked, this period will be noted by historians or by history as being the time when the Krishna consciousness movement saved the world. So here in our ISKCON activities, we're trying for that. It's not been easy. What we thought was really, it just happened. Prabhupada wanted a temple. It wasn't uncommon for devotees to just grab a bag full of incense and a couple of dollars in their pocket. I remember hitchhiking from Sydney to Melbourne to help start a new temple there. We did the same thing with Perth, myself and one other devotee, Kurma to begin with. We went to Perth to start a center there. There was just the two of us. We had a few books and some incense. And that was it. We'd just go out in the street, start chanting, and, a temple would appear. So that happened all over the world. I would never do that. Not nowadays. I mean, even if I wasn't, even if my health was good, I can't imagine doing what we used to do. In the times when we first joined, we had so many problems. As we got bigger, we got more irritating to the local authorities, the police, and the council officers, and we get harassed, we get put in jail. And in 72, not long after I joined, when I did join in 72, every day the activity was to go out for at least 6 hours a day, right? So Dave was there.
6 to 8.
6 to 8 hours a day just chanting. And we'd stand on one spot and just chant. And then all the office workers, they'd be going crazy. Yeah, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. And they would, for hours and hours and hours, they'd get really annoyed. So they would complain to the local city council. They would send their officers. They would try to, arrest us, put us in the jail. We get fined, I think, $60 or something for obstruction, obstructing the pavement. They tried different things to stop us. So at one point, what they did, they had 2 of their men, councilmen, and they would walk along with the devotees. There might be 6 or 8 of us chanting on the main street. And one of them had a camera, and the other one had a notebook. And they would stop us. They'd say, "Okay, son, what's your name?" And we'd give them these names. Oh, Prasadam Das. Yeah, or Harry Ball Das, or something like that. We'd be laughing. They'd write it down really seriously. They'd take a photograph of him so they could match the name, with the person. And after a few months of doing that, then we got notification that there's going to be a trial. We're all going to be, all the people that have been booked, they were going to be taken to court, and then they would ban us. That was their idea. So Prabhu was the temple president, I think, at that time. And he wrote to Prabhupada in about August that we're being harassed every day. Now they're going to bring a case against us. So what to do? Shall we hire a lawyer? So he said a lawyer will cost about $1,000. We couldn't even afford to come up with a couple of $100, to pay the rent, or to speak about paying $1,000 for, some lawyer. And so it was, shall we just go on doing what we're doing? Should we hire a lawyer? We don't know what to do. So Prabhupada wrote back and he said, no, he said, just like in London, they're having so many conflicts with the local authorities, but they kept going out. They were jailed, but they kept going out. He said eventually the authorities gave up. So he said, you just do the same thing. Let them come. He said, we will not stop chanting Hare Krishna. So he said, don't worry about big lawyers, because if they bring you to court and you lose the case, then they have a legal right to stop you. But as long as there's no,
Precedent.
Not precedent. Anyway, as long as they don't bring a case, then you can go on. It's kind of like a grey area. It's neither legal or not legal. But if you actually go to court, that will make it legal, and then they'll have a way to capture you. So he signed it at the bottom, and then he added in his own handwriting, he said, actually, there's no difference in chanting on the street, or chanting in the temple, or chanting in the jail. Just go out and... So Prabhupada told us, go to jail if you have to, but keep on chanting. So when the time came, the case came to court, not a single devotee was there. Nobody was there to represent us because we were all out, chanting and selling books. So they brought this case up, and the council lost the case. There was no defense. and they wanted to have us banned from the street. But the judge was looking at the, charge sheet, and he was saying, we don't even know who these people are. They're not here in court. We don't know where they are. He said, take this prasadam das. Now, who is he? Is he still even in Sydney? Maybe he's gone somewhere else. If he's not in Sydney, then we can't do anything. So they had no proof. They had they had nothing to go on. So he dismissed the case. And he said, I think that they add a lot of colour to the city. So he must have seen us chanting in the street and liked it. So when the case came up, he just dismissed it. We carried on doing what Prabhupada had told us. So it was that kind of faith that Prabhupada could instill in us, that we could do the impossible. He was doing the impossible, and he told us we could do the impossible also. So that's just, a couple of stories, but you can endlessly repeat that. Prabhupada would regularly get, letters about difficulties in London, difficulties in Germany, difficulties in South America. Difficulties everywhere. But Prabhupada was this one tiny little man, seemingly very innocuous, who had this desire to take over the whole world. So he used to use that phrase, in like a needle, out like a plow. Yeah. So Prabhupada would laugh. Brahmananda told him once, he said, if we'd have known what you really came for, Srila Prabhupada, he said, we would never have joined. But once you got, once you were Prabhupada's man, that was it. You are Prabhupada's man. And Krishna consciousness is such that you can never forget it. Yeah. Sometimes people will fall in Maya, drift away for a while. But you can never forget Krishna. You can never forget Prabhupada. Their imprint was there in your heart. So it took a little while for us to get organized. Prabhupada had this very broad vision. And so within just a few years, an international society was established. So I'm going to stop at this point, at least the narration. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
The question. It's a little bit controversial, but not real controversial. Vanashram Dharma. Srila Prabhupada in some of the morning walks here in Mayapur and also in Vrindavan, I saw your name was present there when Prabhupada began to say we have to introduce this. And I think perhaps it's even you at one point said that Prabhupada, we're Vaishnavas, we're chanting Hari Krishna.
I was here in Mayapur.
We don't need that.
On the Lotus Building.
So you were mentioning culture, and I've been living in India for 27 years, you mentioned. I know a lot of Western devotees who've learned Bengali or Hindi. There's no question, if you want to learn a culture, you have to live in the country, you have to learn the language. But even those devotees who know the language so well, they still haven't learned the culture 100%. Right. They still haven't imbibed that. So when we speak about learning the culture, and you were there with Srila Prabhupada this time, and you have this perspective now with the years looking back. Can you share some thoughts about this? What does it mean? How can we learn the culture like that?
Well, Prabhupada did. It's fairly common knowledge that if you really, as you say, you want to enter into a culture deeply, you have to know the language. I remember when the Vrindavan temple had just been opened, and Agnidev Rrabhu, he was one of the main managers there in building the temple. And he'd been there for 4 years. So he was getting a bit agitated, and he was thinking about getting married. But in those days, there was a lot of pressure not to get married. Marriage is Maya, basically. So he wanted to avoid getting married, although he was feeling agitated. So he came to see Prabhupada in Delhi, and he explained that, I think I should leave Vrindavan for a while, and I could go to the Middle East or other places and collect money, for the Vrindavan project. But I just feel that I need to get out because, my mind's getting agitated with sex desire. So Prabhupada looked at him and he said, wherever you go, your mind goes with you. So, anyway, at one point, Gananava said, well, Prabhupada, I've been in Vrindavan now for 4 years. He was thinking that was a really long time. He was forgetting that Prabhupada he'd been living in Vrindavan for many, many years, apart from, the regular Indian culture. So for Prabhupada, he wanted us to learn. That was a point of criticism for not just Gananava, but for a number of us, that if we want to stay in India, we should learn the language properly. And that way you'd be much more effective in preaching. So those that did it, like Chutananda, he was several years on his own, practically here in India. But he learned the languages, he was a brilliant speaker, and everybody appreciated that. So Prabhupada definitely wanted his followers to learn the local cultures, especially India. He wanted us to learn Hindi or Bengali, and that will be very effective. Yeah, people take you seriously if you bother to learn their language. So what was your...
Well, I know devotees who learn languages, but they told me, Kiran Hospital once told me, he said, I can speak Bengali so good in the dark, they don't know.
Is he still around?
They don't even know that I'm a Westerner, because Bengali is so good.
Right.
He said, but I'm always going to be a Westerner. I'm just different. I'm just my skin, but there's some cultural difference. So
Yeah.
I appreciate this. I'm also interested in language. It's important to learn the language, but it seems like there's something more also. And how do we learn that culture? Without what's said, from your experience.
That's a difficult question. I think if you're fluent in a language, people take you seriously. But personally, when I first joined Prabhupada's party in December of 75, I'd been asked to give him his massage for a few days in Delhi. Then from there, he went to Vrindavan on December 2nd for about 12 days. And Prabhupada liked the massage that I was giving him, but I was not made the servant immediately. Harikesh had this doubt because he'd seen me in action a few months before when I got in a fight with a Bengali. I mean, a real fight. And he thought that I was a crazy guy. He was right, but there were a couple of incidents like that. And so I got asked by Prabhupada to give him his massage. And so I did that for 4 or 5 days. Then he went to Kurukshetra for a day, and from there we back to Delhi, and then we went to Vrindavan. So I was starting to get attached, to doing that service naturally. But Harikesh had organized so that this French devotee, Prituputra, he was living in Vrindavan, so he would take over doing the massage, and that would be the finish for me. And then from when they left Vrindavan and went down to Bombay, Nitai Das was there. He had been Prabhupada's servant previously, so he would rejoin the party. Yeah, yes, the editor. Yeah, Bengali and Sanskrit. So, what was I going to say? When we arrived in Vrindavan, Harikesh took us to one side, and because we knew each other, Prituputra was a good friend. So he had been told, now you're going to massage Prabhupada for whilst he's here in Vrindavan. And, Hari Sauri, thank you very much, goodbye. So in the morning and the first day back in Vrindavan, I had to go to Loy Bazaar and buy a new gamcha for Prabhupada because his regular gamcha, I had left it in a bucket in a motel in Kurukshetra. And I didn't realize it till we got back to Vrindavan that, I'd left Prabhupada's gamcha there in Kurukshetra. So I took Pritiputra with me on a rickshaw. We went to Loy Bazaar. I told him all the details of what was going on, and just amazing how I just happened to be around when Prabhupada needed somebody to give him a massage, and so I was telling Pritiputra, the little things to watch for. So then when we came back to the temple, then Harikash came out to kind of greet us at that side gate next to Prabhupada's quarters. He must have seen us getting off the rickshaw. So he called us over and then he said, I just told Prabhupada that Pritiputra was going to do his massage and Prabhupada got angry and objected. So he said, I'm sorry, but, too bad. Prabhupada's not going to change. So, because Pritiputra was a bit downhearted, I was in ecstasy. And Harikesh told me, now Prabhupada said that not only should you do the massage, but you should do the full day's servant's duties. So get your suitcase and move in. So I moved into Prabhupada's rooms in that little corner room where they have display cabinets now, but that was the servant's room originally. The next day, Prabhupada complained that somebody was snoring. Hansadutta had just joined the party as the secretary for the month. So the two of us, we left Prabhupada's rooms and went up into the guest room in the hotel. And we stayed there. Anyway, I was giving Prabhupada his massage. I started doing his personal service in various ways. And then after about a week, I was just so attached to doing this service. But at the same time, I had Gopal Krishna Maharaj, who was a Grihastha at that time, GBC. He had been telling me, I want you to go to Calcutta and be the temple president there. And he was pushing me. As soon as Prabhupada leaves, you leave. Yeah, Prabhupada will go where he's going. You get on the train to Calcutta. And you're the new temple president there. So I thought, this is ridiculous. I'd only been in India about, a few months, and I didn't know anything. And anyway, I discussed it with Harikesh and Hansadutta, and they told me, go and ask Prabhupada. If you want to be his servant permanent, then ask him. And I was saying, no, I don't want to ask Prabhupada personally and bother him with my little service. So then they said, it's not your service. You're directly, serving Prabhupada. He's the one that will be put out if you don't do it. So that was, I was happy to hear that. They were telling me, go and ask. So I was up on the roof. I was giving him his massage. And then I got my courage up. And I told Prabhupada that Gopal Krishna wants me to go to Calcutta. Somebody else is going to do your personal service. 2 minutes.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا
times a day do they do this? I've heard that one also.
Really curious. My thinking.
Don't bring this up in a minute. I have to finish that story, otherwise I'll forget it. Oh, you can ask, but when I finish the story that I'm telling, then
It seems that we're trying to understand what Prabhupada meant about some devotees think that the national means but other people have suggested that, well, there's different Vaishnavas. The real Vaishnavas have certain standards, and the Bengali Vaishnavas and the Nāma Vaishnavas.
I have another story I can tell them that. Remind Mayapur Dhama.
So, what does it mean with Nāma-haṭṭa? Does it mean I have to become...
Is that the end?
I think so.
Okay. All right, so we were back. So I decided that I would ask Prabhupada if I could stay on as his, become his regular servant. So I drew up my courage and I told Prabhupada that over the last week or so, I've gotten very attached to doing your personal service. So I'm wondering if, I can stay on as your servant. And I told him that I've been scheduled by Gopal Krishna Maharaj, or Gopal Krishna, to catch the train and become the new temple president in Calcutta. So I said, I really don't feel qualified for that. And I've only been in India for 3 months. So I said, I'm not really, fit to do that service. So the first thing Prabhupada asked me, he said, do you know, what is your level of education? So I said, well, I was at a British grammar school. He said, and what do you know about languages? I said, I don't know any other languages. So that was it. He called Hari Kashyap. He said, so he wants to stay with me. He said, what do you think? So by this time, Hari Kashyap had become a lot more favorably disposed to me because he saw how enthusiastically I was doing the service and I wasn't getting in any arguments or anything. So Prabhupada said, all right. He said, then you can stay. So, but the point that I'm making is that he asked me, do you know any languages? And the fact was that I was hopeless at language. So that was a big disqualification. So Prabhupada was probably thinking that, well, if he can speak Hindi or Bengali, then he could be engaged, in doing managerial services. But it was definitely something that he wanted to see. And unfortunately, most of us, at least in the early days, were not very, enthusiastic about learning a new language. Jayapataka Maharaj was here, so that was one thing. Achyutananda and a few others. But a lot of the devotees that were coming to India by that time, 75, 76, to live, they didn't know the languages, so it was a big problem. What was the question? Huh? That's Varnashram, though.
Yeah. My further question was that I have this doubt. What does Prabhupada mean by Varnashram Dharma? Some people think that it means that I should become like a Gujarati or like this or that. But at the same time, the doubt is when we see there's Bengali Vaishnavas, there's South Indian Vaishnavas, there's Manipuri Vaishnavas, there's so many different types of Vaishnavas. And it seems natural there's also going to be American Vaishnavas and Chinese and English and like that. And maybe they're not all going to be the same. I'm just curious.
Well, yeah, I think a lot of people, there's been so much spoken about Varnashram Nobody's ever succeeded so far in ISKCON in doing it. But sometimes I think, this is my own personal, but sometimes I think that we're overdoing it. Yeah, we're putting so much emphasis on the framework, the 4 varnas, 4 ashramas, and then they come up with all examples of the perfect Vaishnav lifestyle, and one, as you said, there's different varieties. The one that strikes me the most in what Prabhupada wanted was the visit to Hyderabad in December of 1976. There's a famous discussion from February 77 here in Mayapur, where Prabhupada said he wanted to implement Varnashram immediately. So this is a couple of months before that, December 76. Prabhupada went down, we had this 560 acres of land that had apparently been donated to ISKCON. And Prabhupada wanted to go down there personally and see how well it was utilized. So Mahamsa was in charge at that time. So Mahamsa was such a guy that he was very active. He had raised the money to build the city temple in Hyderabad. And it was he who had persuaded this family, I think, to donate this 500 acres. It's about an hour outside of Hyderabad. So Prabhupada wanted to go down there, live on the land for a week or two, and then give instructions about how it could be utilized properly. So when we'd been 3 months in Vrindavan, at the very beginning of December, we had to go south to Hyderabad. So myself and Jagadish, she was the secretary, we were sitting in the car outside Prabhupada's rooms, and then Prabhupada came out. As he sat in the back, then he said, now we're going to start a new phase of this movement. So we said, what's that? But he didn't say anything else. So then we said, well, what's that, Srila Prabhupada? And Prabhupada said, Varnashram. So he was living with that determination to go down south and start Varnashram. So it was a chance to see how Prabhupada envisioned, the manifestation of a Varnashram system. So we spent a couple of days in Hyderabad. Mahamsa, whenever Prabhupada called for him, first of all, he put Prabhupada in the city centre. And then Prabhupada had been there 2 or 3 days. He kept asking, where is Mahamsa? And they would say, oh, he's gone to the farm. Then finally Prabhupada, I think on the 4th or 5th day, he said, I'm not staying here a moment longer. We're going out to the farm. So he went out to the farm, and then the same thing. He was sitting at the farm. Where is Mahamsa? Oh, he's in the city. So it was a little awkward to start with. But Prabhupada had a plan. And he wanted Mahamsa, who was his main manager there, to be there to take the instruction. So in the morning walks, Prabhupada was going around different areas of the land. And he said, we want to establish this Varnashram system here. So he said, you just need, first of all, you have to attract people to come. So he said, every day you should go out on Kirtan, Sankirtan, and announce that there's a program in the evening at the Hare Krishna farm. And speak for 5 or 10 minutes, not much because of the villagers, and then have a sumptuous feast. So in that way, that's all that's required. Then you'll see, they'll start chanting. After they start chanting, they'll get purified. Once they get a little purified, then they may want to come and be a devotee or live with the devotees. So he said, in different areas of this land, you build like a small village, 10, 12 houses, not more. And the local farmers can be invited to come and live there. And they'll be given 1 or 2 acres of land. They're farmers already, so they don't have to learn anything. Just that we say, all right, now you come and we'll give you land on our area. And he said each group of houses should have a deity, so that in the morning, for Mangalarati, each place, then they would have the Mangalarati. Then they would go out and then do their business as farmers, because early morning's the time for farming. And then in the evening they come back, they freshen, and then they have more arati. So he said, and that's it. Simple as that. So the concept is very simple, but if you look, there's one point I missed. Mahamsa asked Prabhupada, I think it was Mahamsa, what deity should we have? So, because, we're used to Radha Krishna, Gauratai, and Prabhupada said it doesn't matter, any Vishnu Tattva, because people in this area, they're attached to Balaji. So if they want to have a deity of Balaji, that's good. Any Vishnu Tattva will be okay. Lakshmi Narayan, Sita Ram. So that was the general outline that Prabhupada gave. Nothing more than that. The people would come, be attracted to the lifestyle, and once they're attracted, then you provide some land so that you grow your own food, make your own cloth, grow your own medicine, make your own house, all from local materials. So he said that way, nothing fancy, just simple and straightforward. What they can do as farmers, they continue. They're already trained. So I think, as I say, in ISKCON we've got an overinflated idea, or too idealistic an idea of what Varnashram actually is. Varnashram is not, stricture. It flows. They're kind of like the farmers, they're already farming. All right, stay farming. Don't do anything artificial. What you know, you use it in Krishna's service. But the main thing is that you gather in the morning and chant. And you gather in the evening and you chant. And that's all it was, just chanting. That was the main purificatory practice. And as a person chants, they start to understand, I guess from within inspiration and from Prabhupada's books, how to gradually develop that. But that was the beginning point. Now we're going to start Varnashram. So that was in December. Mid-February, we were here in Mayapur. That was when we had that long conversation. So there's more detail there. But to my mind, that's the essence of it. You have some land, you do this, self-sufficient lifestyle as much as possible, and chant Hare Krishna and be happy, and that's it. Your life is successful. Now later on, and I think same as we've seen the transformations in ISKCON since Prabhupada's disappearance, it's nothing like what it was when Prabhupada was here, except that we always chant. As long as we keep the chanting going, we know we're all right. But we never had huge congregations. There were no congregations, as far as I can remember. In the West, at least in Australia, there were people that had joined and then left, but they had enough faith that they would come for the Sunday feast. Yeah, you remember that? There was a group of we used to call them bloopers, ecstasy crew. So that you'd only ever see them on a Sunday, and just before the feast was served out, right? Because the normal standard was that people would come, we'd sit down, have kirtan, then somebody would give a talk, and then at the end of that a bit more kirtan, and then we'd serve the feast. So you'd see the ecstasy crew would start manifesting just before the evening arati and stay for the prasadam, and then off they got. So that was ISKCON in those days.
It's changed quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean that was some of the substance. And if you weren't living, is this on?
Went out from back on.
If you weren't living in the temple, you were in Maya. Not very but now, practically everybody's a congregation.
Even
So you don't hear ever. For many years I've heard of somebody who's left the movement or left the temple structure and then been referred to as a gluten or he's gluten. For those of you that don't know what gluten means, so apparently somebody left in the early days. That was reported to Srila Prabhupada, and he responded by name. But the person who fallen into the material ocean material existence. Is this working, is it? So nowadays this comes much, much different from what it was in the early days. Naturally, nothing's stagnant, everything is active. If you don't move, things will move around you. So that's what's happening. It gets a life of its own.
Based on your description, I just wanted to have a comment about this. It seems that some people think Varnashram Dharma means Manasamhita, it means understanding all these technical details, but what you were just speaking sounds more like Prabhupada's vision of Varnashram was self-sufficiency. Do you have any comments about that?
Well, only part of it.
I'm sorry?
Only part of it. Only part of it. Self-sufficiency is one thing, but what if you're living in the city? You can't do that. The essence of Varnashram is chanting. Chanting, that's the Yuga Dharma. The reason for organizing society in a Varnashram system is simply to get people in a position where they can regularly chant, without disturbance. So whatever you want to do, get a big farm or, have hundreds of people joining or whatever. But the idea is that Varnashram is a vehicle in one sense. It's like a social vehicle or organization to get people to the point where they chant Hare Krishna 24 hours a day. Caitanya Sada Hari. That's it. So whatever you do, whatever way you organize things, if you come to the end point, Savipram Samparo Dharmo, if you come to the right point, you're successful. So Prabhupada's descriptions of Varnashram can be very technical, but they can be very, very simple as well. And I think that Prabhupada, at least just to get things rolling, he had some simple attempts at trying to start Varnashram. And then later on, actually, I just remembered, when I first joined, I got hold of a Back to Godhead magazine. It was about a number 34 or 35 or something. And there was an article by Karanda Prabhu. Now, in the old days, he was the most influential devotee in the movement, at least in the West. He was running the BBT, he was the LA Temple president, and very well respected. So he had written an article for Back to Godhead. We're all right. He had written this article. Is it on?
He's using this. Yes.
I'm using this. All right. Okay. All right. Now, what was I just saying? Karanda. So he wrote an article that was published in Back to Godhead, where he said we're not trying to start a Varnashram system. Yeah. He said that what we want is a good group of Brahmins. If we could have at least just a few good men who were Brahmins, that's as much as what we can aim for. He said to try to do more than that and implement all the Varnas and Ashramas would be a rather fanatical endeavor. So that was, I think, 72, 73. 74, there's a series of morning walks, Prabhupada's here in Mayapur, I think, where he starts to say that yes, we should have a Varnashram system. 2 years before, there was an article that had been published saying we don't want one. Yeah, so Prabhupada was practical. He could shift, emphasis whenever he felt it was necessary. So the Varnashram system, that Prabhupada promoted was very simple, as we see from his visit to Hyderabad. But it's not by any means the only way that you can do it. Varnashram can be done, different flavors of it, as you mentioned, where there's some cultural overlap. We're Westerners, but we try to be Vaishnavas. Actually, we're Vaishnavas, but we're trying to be Westerners. So, whatever works, as long as you chant Hare Krishna, as long as it brings you to that point. Now, as far as self-sufficiency goes, we started buying properties. New Vrindavan was the first one, but after that, around about 73, 74, a number of properties were purchased. This idea of not Varnashram, but self-sufficiency started to be pushed quite a bit. But to date, I think only maybe one or two places have figured out how to be self-sufficient. Maybe Hungary. I don't know, is there any other place that's self-sufficient? Any ISKCON center? All right, maybe somewhere in India with a lot of money. But outside of that, we've not been very successful, and we need to address that. But the purpose has to be kept in mind, the focus has to be kept in mind. Self-sufficiency is not absolutely essential. Maybe, in 5 years' time or 10 years' time or 20 years' time, they'll spring some other worldwide epidemic and wipe out half the population, and then, we may realize the importance of self-sufficiency. But right now we haven't got it. But it's something, maybe that will manifest at some point, just as Prabhupada kind of shifted emphasis when he was here on, certain aspects of establishing certain aspects of the movement. At some point, because Prabhupada said it so much, emphasized self-sufficiency so much, it's not Varnashram in and of itself, but it's a main support. It's the basis on which social development will come, spiritual development will come. So we have to be ready for it. We have not become helpless, but at least be active in figuring out how to make these farming communities work, how to become self-sufficient. That will lend itself very well to the concept of Varnashram. If we don't do that, we can still have a kind of Varnashram, but in what form and shape it'll take, we'll have to see. It depends on, the social condition of the human society at that time. So maybe we're not ready for it yet. Maybe Krishna's holding that one back for a later time. Mataji.
You don't hear too much about Srila Prabhupada's visit to Tehran, if you know anything.
Yeah, I do.
Also South America.
Were you there?
No.
All right, yes. Well, as far as I know, Prabhupada went to Tehran twice, 75 and 76. I was there for a week in 76 with Prabhupada. There was some amazing preaching that was going on at that time. Atreya Rishi, he had been a head accountant at, what was that company? There was some big accountancy company in New York. Atreya Rishi was working for them when he became a devotee. And in 1974, he wrote to Prabhupada and suggested that he could go and begin an ISKCON center in Tehran, because in those days it was run by the Shah of Iran. They were a little favorably disposed to Western scholars and, Americans in particular. He would welcome them. So it was a little different from what it is now. But Prabhupada there went there for a week. There was the Traya Rishi and his wife, and he had started a new branch, like a foreign branch of this company that he was working for, and he was in charge of it. And Navayovana was an old friend of his who had joined the movement, or joined the movement with a Traya Rishi. So he was married, they had a kid. Then there was Gyanagamya Prabhu, who was a brahmachari at that time. There was, no, well, he wasn't there when Prabhupada was there. Paramahamsa Swami. And he was a yoga teacher, or had been before he became a devotee. So he was there in Tehran, just the only sannyasi, and he had started a yoga course, which he was advertising. And the Shah of Iran's, either his sister-in-law or his niece, or somebody from the inner circle of the Shah of Iran, started doing yoga. I think it was a nephew that had become addicted to drugs. And to get him off it, then they, what's his name? Paramahamsa, no. Oh, that's right, yeah. Paribrajacharya, yes, Paramahamsa was Prabhupada's secretary previously. Paribrajacharya, he had been training this boy in Hatha Yoga. So he was giving such a good report to his family that then they wanted to do it. So this niece of the Shah, because she couldn't come to some, storefront and do it with the commoners, so they had Paribrajacharya going to the palace. He was the first white man ever to, Westerner, to go inside the inner chambers of the Shah of Iran. So, he was in an incredibly, wonderful preaching situation. And because of him, he invited some of the family members to come to America, or they were coming to America. So he brought them to LA. They showed them the first American theistic exhibition, right, the dioramas. They came in and saw the deities, offered garlands. They got prasadam. And Rameshwara gave them some original paintings from, I forget who the artist was, but it was the painting of Krishna and Balaram stealing yogurt. Yeah, one of them standing on the other's shoulder. And I'm not sure, but there was another picture of a baby Krishna with his hand in a pot of yogurt, and he's got incredibly beautiful it was. Anyway, so they gave those paintings to the Shah of Iran's family, and apparently they had them hanging, on the walls in the palace, main palace. So this was all going on when Prabhupada arrived there. They weren't able to arrange for Prabhupada to personally meet them, but Prabhupada was so happy, so grateful that they'd done this preaching work and gotten into these people knew the king of, is it Jordan, Syria, all those Middle East countries. The Shah of Iran was a very powerful man. And what he did influenced everybody else. So this lady had offered to print the translation of Sri Upanishad and have that distributed in Iran. Although it's actually it was illegal, everything had to be Muslim, Arabic. But this woman was so fired up, she was going to print one of Prabhupada's books and have that distributed in Iran. So it was an amazing time. Oh, and the other ones that were there was Dayananda and Nandarani. Yeah, Dayananda was working at IBM in the day. Atreya had his business. And Nandarani had started a school. There's a lot of Indians there. So, for work purposes, just as in the Middle East even now. It's all Indians. So they were there. So yeah, it was just a brilliant, effort on Atreya Rishi's part. Prabhupada was so pleased with them. that they were doing that. It's just, anyway, you can say it's Krishna's arrangement that after a couple of years they got kicked out. But whilst Prabhupada was there, he advised them that they were renting a house or several houses. They would invite people to come to the house and then they would preach to them. But the Indian community, they wanted us to have deities. So they bought some Radha Krishna deities but didn't install them because, it's like a blasphemy amongst the Muslims to worship a deity. It's considered to be the most offensive thing that you can do amongst the Muslims. So Atraya Rishi was kind of caught between trying to satisfy the Western devotees because they didn't like it. There was no morning program, there was no greeting of the deities, etc. And on the other hand, you got these educated Muslims coming who were interested in Krishna conscious philosophy, but they couldn't tolerate seeing a deity. So I'm not sure whether they ever resolved that problem. I don't think those deities were ever installed. Oh, maybe they may have. What they did was they sectioned off the house. So when the Muslim people came that they were preaching to, they would take them to, one room of the house. When the Indians came, then they would be preached to in another room.
You started to say that Prabhupada gave some advice. Prabhupada advised them something.
Maybe it might come. But whilst we were there, they wanted to buy a restaurant or a house where they could have a restaurant, prasadam distribution. So we actually Prabhupada went in the car. There was a house for sale. It was in a place just outside of Tehran. And when Prabhupada went there, he looked around. It wasn't a big place. It was a small place. Maybe you could get 40 or 50 people there. But Prabhupada liked it. And there was an old man and his wife that owned it. They were selling it. And when the tour had finished, we had a look around. Then the man invited Prabhupada to sit down. And then he brought this big, huge plate of fruits, different kinds of fruits. And he presented that to Srila Prabhupada as a gift. And Prabhupada was so happy. He said, this is culture. He said, this is the Parsis in India. This is the original culture, Persian. The Persians were highly educated, very sophisticated civilization. So he said, this is the remnants of that. Here's a holy man. No matter what he is, you must, offer respects, give him a gift. So Prabhupada was very, very pleased by that whole visit. It's just a pity that we lost it, but I guess that's Krishna's arrangement. Did that answer what you were?
Thank you so much. Yeah, next time maybe you can tell us more about South America.
South America, I never went there one time. But anyway, let me think. Not today. All right, so is it prasadam time or shall we go on or shall we do? Kirtan, yes.
So Prabhupada ki jai.
Hari Sauri, prabhu.
Everybody should keep on time. You have to read the bhakti to know what to.
The rice is inside that big bag.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Bag.
Okay, it's where?
Now.
It's offered?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. If the person not coming?
My son
I need to run the marriage.
Yes.
I was wondering
This is yours, this is mine. But what's mine is yours. So what's mine is yours. Kirtan. That one? Okay. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I know, but this one's playing. It's okay. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Krishna
Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. One more time. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Let's sing. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Sai Gaura Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Sitanath Gaura Premanande. Jai Nitalila Pravishwam Vishnupad Paramhamsa Paribraja Gacharya Stotarasata Srishiman, His Divine Grace, Oboi Charanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki. Nityalila Pravishtom Vishnupad Paramhamsa Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada Jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki. Nāma-haṭṭa Srila Haridas Thakur Ki. Sadguru Swamis Prabhus Ki. Prem se Gosi Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki. Sri Sri Radha Krishna Go Gopinath Sham Kun Radha Kun Giri Govardhan Ki. Sri Vrindavan Dhama Ki. Sri Mayapur Dhama Ki. Sri Jagannath Puri Dhama Ki. Ganga Devi Jamuna Mai Ki. Bhakti Devi Tulsi Maharani Ki. Naam Sankirtan Ki. Harinam Mahamantra Ki. Brihat Mridanga Seva Ki. Parama Karuna Sri Sri Gaur Nityananda Ki. Sama Veda Bhakta Vrinda Ki. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Glories to Prabhupada.